You can use literally any watercolor paper with these pens. You don't have to use the Cricut watercolor paper. Even though it is a little bit easier, I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. My name is Kelly, and let's get clacking. Now, at the time of filming this, the watercolor markers are still extremely new, so I do expect that we will get some more designs in the future. But at the moment, the only way to access the ready-made watercolor designs in Cricut Design Space are from one of two different ways. So we have the Home tab, and you'll see here it says New Watercolor Cards, so you can click on that, and it will open up many different watercolor designs that you actually have within Cricut Design Space that you can use. And you can scroll through them and even look at the rest of the designs that they may have available for you to use. Or if you are going from your canvas, then you will click on the project section on the side and type in watercolor. And it's important you need to use the American spelling, not the British English spelling of watercolor, so that's without a U. It'll bring up some of the watercolor designs, as well as a few other things that you won't really be able to use as easily with the watercolor pens. But using the pens is actually very simple. It's not a very complicated process at all, so we're going to set up a design that is not a watercolor design, and I'll show you how to actually use the pens themselves. So if you want to make a simple card with just a nice bold watercolor title, you can just add in a piece of text and change the font to be whatever you want it to be. I'm going to make it a nice thick bold font so we can have some nice movement inside the letters for the watercolor. I'm going to use the Bouquet typeface font, which I got from Envato Elements. And if you want a link to this particular font on Envato Elements, I will leave a link down in the description for you. I'm going to make this a thank you card. So I'm going to type in thank you and maybe put it on 2 separate lines. And I'm also going to add in a shape that I'm going to use to actually cut the card itself. So I'm going to be cutting this out of normal watercolor paper. So I've added in a square to my canvas, and I'm going to be changing the size to suit what I want the card to be. I need to make sure to double the height of the card so that I can fold it over. So I'm going to make this 22 or 21 by 15. And I'm going to add in a score line so that the machine will score in the middle of the card. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that it goes across and make it a little bit longer. I'm going to select both the square shape as well as the score line, and I'm going to align them in the center so that I know that the score line will be in the middle of the card, and I'm going to attach them. Going to send it to the back so that I can see the thank you of the design, and I'm going to change the color of the card to white just so that I can see what I'm working with. The thank you words of the part of the card are set to basic cut. Now we don't want to basic cut this, we want to draw it with a pen feature, so I'm going to change the operation from basic cut to pen. Now with normal pens, you may not want to only draw the outline, but when it comes to a watercolor pen, because you want the watercolor to be on the inside of the letter and you want it to be all pretty, typically you do actually want it to only draw the outline. So I'm going to change the color of the pen itself to change from a fine point to the marker. Now the marker pens, you'll see there are a number of different types of pens that you can use. So it's washable, metallic, and if you scroll all the way down past all of the infusible inks, you will then see the watercolor markers. So from here we can change it to whatever color we want. So if we want to have it blue, I'm going to change it to blue, and you'll see kind of what the design looks like. Now we can start playing around with the actual design of the watercolor markers. So I can increase the letter space a little bit because they are a little bit too close together for my liking. And what I also want to do here is I also want to weld this, because you'll see that it has now taken away those little sections on the inside, which means that it's not going to look as funny with my design. Here is where you can start playing around with the colors that you want. So if you want the thank to be in one color and the you to be in another color, you can actually do that from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the design. I'm going to contour, and I'm going to remove the thank part so that I only have the U in one color. And then on the other design, I'm going to contour out the U. So now there are two separate layers, and you can do this in other methods, but this is how I like to do it to make sure that the spacing is all uniform. And I can change the color here from blue to green. And I can redesign it a little bit, maybe even add in some other features. So if I wanted to add in an image of like a flower, then I can go in here and I can type in flower. Now, even though this is a basic cut design, what we can do is we can change the line from basic cut to pen. And we can do exactly the same as what we did for the words by using the contour feature to change the colors of the lines. So I'm going to duplicate this design, and I'm going to use the contour feature to remove everything else except the inside part of the flower. So the inside part will then be yellow or orange. So I'm going to change that color to orange. And the outside of the flower, I'm going to remove the outside petal, and I'm also going to remove the inside petal, and I'm going to leave that, I'm going to change that to red. And of course you can add multiple other different elements to your cards if you wanted to. You can have many other things added, but I'm going to leave mine just like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the entire card, and I'm going to right click and attach it so that everything draws and scores in exactly that specific location. Now I'm going to click on Make It. I'm going to click Continue. And from here, I'm going to select the material that I'm going to be cutting. So I'm going to be cutting heavy watercolor paper. So I'm going to select that one and star it so that I can use it in the future. And I'm going to click Done. Now it'll tell me exactly what I need to load first. We're going to have all of our pens ready. So our green, red, and yellow watercolor pens, as well as the fine point blade and the scoring wheel. We can change the scoring wheel to the scoring stylus if we want, but I'm going to leave it on the double scoring wheel. And then all the fun begins once we have finished cutting and drawing our watercolor cards. Now, of course, the card has been scored, so we just need to fold it on the score line. And there we go, that's our card. Now, of course, it looks a little bit plain, but luckily for us, when it comes to using watercolor, that's where it really starts to shine after we've done our part. So we have our watercolor brush, and essentially what you do is you just screw the top off, and you pour a little bit of water into this little reservoir. So you can see there's a little bit of water at the bottom there. I don't like to keep mine full because I like to control the water a little bit, but I'm not an expert at this, so take that with a pinch of salt. Now we can really start having fun. You can kind of just start putting the brush down, making the water page a little bit watery there, and slowly get the ink wet and brush it into the inside. And you can kind of go to town on this. You can have it as much or as little watercolor as you want. The more water you have, typically the more the ink moves. course, you can let it dry for a little bit and then come back a little bit later and then start playing around with it again, because you don't have to, only do it once and then that's it. So you can go back, and if you find that your brush is a little bit colored of the one color, just wipe it off on your hand or on a piece of scrap paper, and you can go back in again and get a second layer of color. And of course, you can do as much or as little as you like with the watercolor cards. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up, as it really helps the channel. And check out this video on infusible ink pens if you're wanting to use those for the first time. I'll see you in my next video, and remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.